Hello friends, welcome to Joy of Life. So before we proceed with this episode, what I would like to tell you is that if you have not seen the system design introduction video wherein we have discussed about the architecture of this mini project that we are building, I would highly recommend you to check the same. I will leave a link to the description as well so that you can click, check the same and then get back onto the video. So in the last episode, we have covered a lot of details about Kubernetes. We have seen pods, deployments, replica sets, services. But we haven't done so for Cassandra, right? We have just created a single node cluster and then we just moved on, right? We have just used it and got our things done, right? But I feel that we should be knowing a lot more details about Cassandra. That's why I thought of creating this episode wherein we will see all the features of Cassandra, try to understand in a lot more details that why we choose Cassandra, what are the benefits of Cassandra, how to use a Cassandra cluster, how is replication done in Cassandra, how we ensure consistency in Cassandra. All those things we are going to talk in some details. As a developer, we should know all those things. So I thought that this video will bridge those gaps that we have just left behind. I thought of creating it later, but I thought it is important to cover it now. And as we always do, we are not just going to talk about theory over here. We are going to get things up and running. We'll start a full cluster on our Docker. We cannot have many nodes, but we can have 2 or 3 nodes. And we'll see how we can configure 2 separate data center using the same Docker instance. And we'll see the importance of it and try to cover some details about consistent hashing, how the replication happens in Cassandra, and things like that, how the availability is guaranteed. There are many things. We'll go through them one by one. So let's start. And what we'll do is we have Redis running. We need Redis, so we are good over here. We already have a container for Cassandra that we have used in the earlier videos, but we are not going to use it because that was a single instance where we have used the simple strategy for replication. We are not going to do that. We are going to use the network topology strategy, and we are going to understand how they differ and how they really help us over here, right? So with that, what I'll do is I'll first try to explain what it is, what is consistent hashing, and what is a hash ring, and how it all happens, right? So let's go over to the board where we are going to see in much more detail. So what I have done over here is I have created a ring. So a consistent hashing is nothing but a ring, and it has a huge range of -2 to the power of 64, I guess, to 2 to the power of 64 minus 1. The range is huge actually, and we will take a smaller example to see how this range plays a role. So let's imagine we have a ring like this, and now what happens is we introduce nodes over here, right? So these nodes are nothing but instance, right? So let's say this is our node 1. Let's say this is 0, and just the previous one prior to this one, the value is say 999. So what we basically do over here is we use a hash function. What happens is each of this node that we talked over here is passed through this hash function, and it produces a number which is pretty big. Let's say a number like 893521167, something like this, a very big number. So we do a mod with the size in the ring, and we get a number between 0 to 999, right? And we then place the node over here. We take this node over here and we place it in the ring. So let's say this node got a value of say 20. Just for the sake of simplicity, let's imagine this node got a value of 20. Now we are talking about a cluster, right? So we have more nodes over here. And similarly, we do the same thing with the node 2, and suppose it also produced a new value of say 120. Simplicity, let's say there are 5 nodes. So let me put those 5 nodes into the ring. So let's say this is my ring over here. So what happens is I place the ring in a clockwise direction. You can do it in anti-clockwise also, there is no harm. So we place the first node at 20. second at 120, 480, 600, 700, let's say. Let's understand what happens here. So this node over here, the node 1, so all the requests in the range from 701 till 20 throughout this ring will be served by node 1. Similarly, for node 2, what will happen? Any value from 21 to 120 will be served by node 2. So now what are these values that we are talking about, right? So what happens is when our application receives a URL, say google.com, we pass it through the hash function, and a hash is produced again from the range of 0 to 999. Let's say google.com, we got a value which is, let's say 110. So what happens over here is I place that value in the ring somewhere over here, since it's 110, right? So let me put over here 110 and Google. This value over here 120 will be stored in the node 2, because this is the nearest node in the clockwise direction from the value of 110 that we have got for this URL, right? Similarly, let's say we are putting Microsoft.com. Since we deal with URL, I am giving you the example with URL only, and it gets a value of say 160. So a node over here as 160, and we have the value of Microsoft.com. And let's say the value is 160. So the nearest clockwise node is this guy over here. So this data, Microsoft.com, will be stored in the node 3. So it will be stored over here. So now when you query and wanted to check the details, so do keep in mind, I am telling you the URL over here, but we are storing the entire object. Since URL is our primary key, this primary key will be used in our hash function. So if you remember, we have a lot of data over here, right? So this is one of our primary key, or we can do with the ID itself. So for the sake of simplicity, I am just thinking that we have the URL as our primary key, right? So next time you wanted to get the Microsoft.com object, and it will have more objects like time, processed, and all those things. So when you give it to the coordinator over here, what does the coordinator do? It takes your URL Microsoft.com, pass it through the same hash function, get the same result of 160 again, and it knows from this consistent hash ring that your value is stored in the node 3, and it goes ahead and retrieves it. So this is how the data is stored. But not only this. So let's take an example over here. So let's say that I am storing over here Facebook.com. So if you remember last time when we created our key space, we have given a replication factor of 1. That means only one copy of this data is going to stay. But that's not the case in reality, right? We say that we wanted to store in multiple places. Let's say I wanted to keep 3 copies. So when I hand it over to my coordinator node, let's say my coordinator node is node 4, and node 4 identifies that this data goes to node 5, node 1, and node 2. So this is how your replication actually happened. So what essentially happened was Facebook was stored in node 5, node 1, and node 2. All the node has a copy of this. And how this helps? So basically you are not storing the data in a single place. So even if your node 5 goes down tomorrow, there is no problem. You can still get your data back from node 1 and node 2. So this is how your simple strategy works, wherein we give a replication factor, and every data is stored in multiple replicas of it. So these are nothing but each one of our is a replica. Okay. So similarly, when you did for Microsoft also, though I showed it for the simplicity purpose that we are storing it over in node 3, but in reality, what would have happened is it was stored in n number of nodes, where n is the number of replica that you have specified, right? So this is how your replication is taken care. Also, if you observe few things over here, so what is happening is that we are storing in different nodes, right? And these nodes can be in a single rack, right? So what I can do over here is I can specify that this is my rack 1 and I can say that this is my rack 2. And now we have interesting thing over here, right? So we talked about a simple strategy, and I mentioned that day that we have something called a network topology strategy also, right? In this network topology strategy, I can specify that, okay, I want 3 copies of my replica, but you place the replicas in such way that my data center 1 has 1 replica and my data center 2 has 2 replicas. So what will happen if this entire data center goes down also, my data can still be served from the other data center or from the other rack, right? So this is how your Cassandra ensures availability, right? And the other part is the consistency. Let's say we have the node 4 as our coordinator. So I first got this facebook.com request. I handed over to my coordinator, and my coordinator has ensured that data center 1 has 1 replica and data center 2 has 2 replicas, right? So what it did was he has put the data into these 3 nodes. And now we wanted to update this data. So another update request came over here, and for some reason what happened was my data center 2 or the rack 2 has a problem. So this operation has failed, the one with the red I am putting right now. So these 2 has failed, right? And this one over here, the other one in the data center 1 or the rack 1 is successful. So the operation went like this, that node 2 and 3 has failed and node 1 was able to update. But moments later what happened is this data center was up and everything is fine now. But basically the damage has been done. So my node 2 and node 3 is having stale data. And my node 1 from the other data center has the correct data. So now when I did a operation to get the record, I will go ahead and query from each one of this. So I will receive an object from each one of them, right? Now what will happen along with this object, Cassandra will have some metadata stored with it, and one of the metadata being the timestamp when it was last written, right? Data I got is 23rd, that is today's date, at 8 p.m. right? Same, the write has failed, I got from him 8 p.m. but this guy has returned me the same date but at 9 p.m. So going by this, I can easily figure out that these 2 data are stale data and he is the one who's holding the right data. So of course I am going to return this data, and this node over here, this node 1, he is going to sync up the data between these nodes. So he's going to go ahead and update this data. So now the question is, should we do this all the time? We'll go ahead and get the record. It totally depends. So what Cassandra provides is a transactional consistency that we can provide. So I can set consistency at every level of my transaction. So what does that mean? There are various type of transaction levels that we can set over here. Let's understand the nature of the data in few of the cases over here, like a Facebook like. So if it is not consistent, eventually I am fine with that. So consistency is low for this data. So I don't need to be so much consistent that I have to show it immediately. A couple of seconds here and there could be fine. Let's talk about the Amazon transaction. For this, I need a consistency level which is literally high. So over here, I need a higher consistency level. So each of this transaction over here has a different need, right? For here, I can compromise on the consistency level, but for this, I cannot, right? So we have to understand the nature of the data or the transaction that we are doing, and then we need to set the consistency level. So we need to set the consistency level based on the transaction rather than on the generic one, right? So each of my transaction could have a different level of consistency, and Cassandra provides a way to do that. So let's understand the consistency level. So we have different consistency level for reads and writes. So here are for the writes, and below we have for the reads as well. So the first consistency level says all. So what does it mean? So it basically means a write must be written to the commit log and mem table on all replica nodes in the cluster for that partition, right? So it has to be written everywhere. So you can understand that we are making it very consistent, right? Then we have the quorums, each quorum and many other things. I'll just touch upon a few. So quorum is one of the most important one. A write must be written to the commit log and mem table on a quorum of replica nodes across all data centers. So we have set the replica number of replica that we want, right? So it will take a quorum of that and it will set based on the quorum. So let's say we have 5 replicas. If it is successful in 3 or 4 of them and does not succeed in all also, so we are going to say this is fine. So all is much more strict than quorum. And then we have the local quorum. So it is also strong consistency. A write must be written to a commit log and mem table on a quorum of replica nodes in the same data center. So this first one, which is a quorum, which it is across the data center, and the local quorum is local to the data center that you are writing to. Then you have one, a write must be written to the commit log and mem table of at least one replica node. So you can understand that we are compromising on the consistency as we go down in this table. Then we have 2, we have 3, and the most lenient one being any. A write must be written to at least one node. If all replica nodes for a given partition key are down, the write can still succeed after a hinted handoff. So what does this mean in any where we have the lowest consistency? We can say that, okay, you go ahead and write in any one of the node, and let's say I have 5 replica and I could write in one of them, right? So I'll provide a hint saying that, okay, if you cannot write to the other nodes within say 3 hours, then you discard this write also. This is the lowest one in the write consistency level that we have. And then coming to the read consistency level, we have almost same things, all quorum, local quorum. Instead of any, we have a serial. So what this serial is something special. It's allow reading the current and possibly uncommitted state of data without proposing a new addition or update. So even if the data is uncommitted also, he is still going to allow it if you are having the transaction level as serial. If a serial read finds an uncommitted transaction in progress, it will commit the transaction as a part of the read. Understand that this is one of the most lenient one. So the advantage with this is when you are doing a consistent read, let's say, so you try with all and it fails, and then you try the same transaction again with quorum, it fails, then you can try with local quorum. Since Cassandra provides the ability to configure your transaction, what we can do is we can downgrade the transaction consistency level in a single transaction and we can try them, right? So let's say we are writing a data which needs to be very much consistent. We can first try with the all. If all fails, we can go for a quorum. If quorum fails, then we can send a 5xx or things like that. It completely depends upon the data that you are working in. Similarly for read, if you want a very consistent read, you can try with the all. If all fails, you try with a quorum. And to understand what quorum is, basically, you can check out this formula over here. So quorum is sum of replication factors. So the total replication factor divided by 2 plus 1. So half of the nodes should acknowledge me saying that the write has been done properly. In that case only, we are going to allow this transaction to happen. So this is what a quorum is, and local quorum is only applicable to that same data center, right? So here are a few scenarios that I want you to think about. So let's say I have shared a post in Facebook and many people are resharing that post. Or the second scenario, I have made a tweet and the thing is retweeted again and again, and maybe it is done 1,000 times and it is showing 998 to me. It's fine actually. After a few seconds, it's going to eventually get consistent. It doesn't matter to me if it is not showing at the real time, right? Even a review in Amazon. So somebody wrote a review and I am seeing the review a minute late or a couple of minutes late. I am fine with that. Product rating, similar thing again. So somebody has rated a product and I saw it a couple of minutes late. It's going to be fine. But think about these scenarios over here. So the seat count in a particular flight in Indigo is showing some wrong data, right? It's not acceptable. So we need very strong consistency in this scenario. Available Amazon Pay balance. So let's say I have $1,000 and I have spent 100, but it's showing 1,000 to me. It's not okay to be eventually consistent on that, right? Even username in Gmail. So a username has been taken already, but it's showing me that it's available, right? So we need to be consistent in all these scenarios. A domain name is not available and it's GoDaddy is telling me it's available, right? So these are the scenarios in the yellow on top wherein we can have a eventual consistency. It's not going to hamper the system or the user experience. But over here, the scenarios below in pink, if it is not consistent immediately, it's going to be a big problem, right? It's going to impact the user experience. And this table plays a very important role in making that decision, right? So enough of theory over here. So we are going to set up a cluster with 3 nodes with 2 data center, and we are going to see how we are going to deal with it. Let's see what all is running. So we have Redis running and we are going to set up a Cassandra cluster. Let's go for it. So the first thing is we have to create the coordinator over here. So this is the node that we are going to talk to, and he's going to delegate everything to the corresponding nodes. So we are naming it CAS1. We are exposing port 9042. We are giving the cluster name as CAS cluster, and we are using this gossip protocol over here in order to communicate. This node will be placed in DC1, that is our data center 1. So let's go ahead and create this node over here. Well, so it has been created. Let's go ahead and check it once. So you can see that I have a Cassandra cluster up. So let's check in the logs. Well, it is up and fine. We are good. So let's go ahead and clean it, and let's see. Yeah, we have the first thing over here. So what we are going to do is we are going to do inspect and get the IP address. What happen is for the other 2 nodes in a different data center or in the same data center, we need a seeding point, and this is nothing but this IP address should be used for seeding. Okay, now we are going to create our second Cassandra instance. We are calling it CAS2, and we have given the seed as the parent or the CAS1 that we have just created. So we have specified the IP address over here, as you see. And then we have the same cluster name and again the same gossip protocol, but check out over here, it's in data center 2, DC2, right? And we are going to spin up this instance. Well, this has also been created. So let's see over here. So you can see that we have 2 clusters over here, Cassandra 1, Cassandra 2, CAS1, CAS2, both are Cassandra. And if I do a docker logs of CAS2, so you will see over here that it is going to, it has not joined yet. So what we can do is we can use the node tool over here to see the cluster. So if you give this command, you can see that we have 2 data center over here. So he has not been owning anything. So 100% of the data will be owned by rack 1, and this is rack 2. So as we have created 2 data center, this is our DC1 and this is our DC2, and DC1 owns 100% of the data. Let's run it again. So you can see now both has joined and both owns 100% of the data, right? And they're in 2 different data center. So right now what I'm going to do is I am going to add a new node into my data center 2. But before that, let's go back to the board once again and let's redraw this diagram. So let's say this was my ring over here, and I have placed a machine over here, let's say at 80, and I have the second machine placed over here. Let's say the range is 1000. So the first machine is placed at 80 and the second is placed at, let's say, at 600. So this machine over here is going to handle everything from 81 to 600, everything that lies over here, right? This guy is going to handle everything from 601 to 80, that is over here, right? Now we are introducing a third machine over here, right? So what will happen? It will also get placed over here, right? And let's say it got a place in 800. So there will be no impact on this guy over here. He is still serving 81 to 600. But this node over here, he was serving 61 to 80. Now he will serve from 801 to 80. And this guy over here, he will serve from 601 to 800. So you can see that every time I introduce a new worker, so let's say I introduce one more worker over here, and let's say he gets a place in the ring somewhere at 300. So only the two node is going to get affected. So what will happen? This guy will serve from 81 to 300 everything, and he will have a reduced scope. He doesn't need to serve from 81, rather he will serve from 301, right? So you can see that only one guy is losing the scope over here, right? So only he is impacted, and the new guy is picking up the new responsibility. So the other node, like when I added over here this node was unaffected. Even he was unaffected, right? Just that he is now serving a subset of what he was serving earlier, right? Previously he was serving 81 to 600. So no change on the upper bound, only the lower bound has changed. So this is 81 to 600. Then he have a smaller subset to serve now. So that's why consistent hashing help us that we can add new node without disturbing the other systems, right? And that is something very similar that we are going to do over here. So we are going to add a new node called cas3 seeding to the same host cas1's IP address, and we are putting this guy into DC2. So when I put this into DC2, he is going to share the load from this guy. So now both were taking 100% of the load, but now since DC2 has another machine over here, so the load will get distributed between them. So it will take a little while for him to pick it up because I think it's starting up at the moment. So I can see that waiting for Gossip to settle. So he's joining the ring now. And let's go ahead and check if he has joined the ring or not. Well, you can see that he has been added to the ring, but his range is not assigned. That's why we have a question mark over here. And soon we'll see that he will be assigned with a range. So over here we can see that now it has been split up between the three, right? They are sharing the load among themselves. Now what we are going to do is we are going to go into our machine, one of the machine, any one is fine. It's not that you have to go to any particular machine. And we'll go to SQL sh prompt, and we are going to create a key space now. And this key space will be different from last time. We are going to use a network topology strategy. And I am telling him that place a replica in DC1 and place a replica in DC2, right? So with the network topology strategy, I can say that how my replication should work, right? So we have created, so let's use URL feeder, and we are inside it, and let's go ahead and create the same table as we have created earlier. So again, the same table, the same command, no change. ID text, URL text, times process, all those same thing. We are going to go ahead and create the table. Okay, this table is here and the table is empty, and we have done it in Cassandra instance 3, right? So let's exit from here and let's go into the instance 2, or let's go to the instance 1, which is in DC1. And we are going to use URL feeder. It should be there, and if we do a select star from URL, the table should be here. So you can see the table is here. And let's do an exit now, and let's clean it up, and let's go ahead and check the nodes tool status now. So you can see that since we have defined a replication policy wherein DC1 should always have a copy, and there is only one node in DC1, so DC1 is going to have the 100% of the record, right? And these guys over here is having 48% and 51%. So when I put a record, when a record goes into this node over here, 172.17.0.5, it will put a copy in 0.3 as well. When we put a copy at 0.4, it has to put a copy at 0.3. So that's why the effective ownership of DC1, just because we have a single machine, has increased to a great extent, right? Previously, if you remember, the load was pretty less. It was 60% or 70%, right? But now it owns 100% of the data, right? And these guys over here, so if I put a record over here in this DC1, this rack, so the replica will either be in 05 or 04. That's why you see lesser percentage over here, and that's why you see a higher percentage or 100% data over here, right? So now what we are going to do is we are going to go ahead and connect to the same endpoint 03, and let's say we are connecting to DC1. Okay, we are running from a local, we don't need to do this. We're pointing to a local, right? So we don't need this, so let's go ahead and fall back to localhost. Anyways, we are not using Kafka, we are good. So we'll just go ahead and restart it. If we had been running from Docker, then we need to provide the IP. So this time we can see that it has been started. Let's send hp.com, and it's a cache miss, and something went wrong. I guess it's the problem with the URL, so let's go ahead and change it. So let's put GitHub, and let's see if we are good. Okay, github.com. I think HP will also be inserted, so let's go ahead and check in the console first. So let's go into CAS1. You can go to any CAS, you can query from any node. Oh, shit, I will use the node tool by mistake. Okay, we will go to CAS2 SQL SH, and let's do a select star from URL. Oops, I did not choose the key space. Select star from URL. So you can see over here that github.com has been inserted, and it doesn't mean that this data is present in this node only. It could be present anywhere. So what I basically mean is, if I go to the other instance also, SQL SH3 also, you can see the data. So there is not going to be any problem with that. So you can query from anywhere you wish to. So you'll see the data from basically virtually everywhere. You will see this data. Even if I go to CAS1 also, you will be able to see this data, because we are in a cluster now, and we are good everywhere. So let's exit this, and let's run our load testing over here. We need to change this 8085, and think we are good to go. So you can see here that we are getting a bunch of requests. You can see over here that we have all the data present over here, right? We have inserted them all. Whatever was there was coming and sitting over here, right? And there are more records actually. You can see more of them. So I've just run 100 of them, and you can see that we have all the records over here, right? And let's go out and let's check how's the distribution look like. So if I do a status now, you can see that 100% of the data is owned by them, right? So even if I just take out one system out of this, right? So let me do a Docker stop of CAS3. So I am killing CAS3 over here. So I'm just stopping CAS3. So which essentially mean we have two nodes over here. So if we do a node tool status now, you can see that in data center 2, one of the node is showing as down. Since we have killed that node, it is no more showing up. Docker ps. CAS3 is gone now. Let's do a Docker logs of CAS3. So you can see over here, it's announcing a shutdown. Now even if I go into one of the system over here, CAS1, and let's say use URL feeder, let me clean this and do a select star from URL. So previously there was 105 records, but you will still see 105 records because of our replication strategy, right? Even if one node goes down, we are good with it, right? We don't need to worry about it. As long as we have set up a right replication policy, we are going to go ahead and have the right replication over here. So I hope you got the idea of how things are working over here, right? And how our replication plays a key role over here, how the data is being replicated, right? And how the availability and the consistency is ensured in Cassandra, right? So not just the theory, we have set up the application and we have ingested so much of the URL as well, right? So we have inserted so much of the records. We took a system down and we have still seen and we are still not seeing any problem when we are trying to get the record, right? So I hope you got the understanding of how Cassandra ensures availability and consistency, and how data center and rack plays an important role in Cassandra. So with that, I will end the video over here. Do let me know if you have any questions. Please put them in the comment section below. And next is, since we are done with Cassandra, the next topic would be on Mongo. We'll concentrate on that. So we are now going to enrich our HTML worker, image worker services, wherein we need a document storage, wherein we will need to store everything as a document, not just as rows. And we are going to also use Elasticsearch and create a endpoint and a UI from where we are going to get this data and complete the life cycle, right? So yeah, please support the channel, please subscribe, and please refer the channel to your friends as well. So I hope you got a good understanding on the Cassandra, how it works and things like that. So please feel free to ask any question that you have, and I'll be more than happy to help. So stay safe, stay subscribed, and see you soon again, guys. Bye bye.